All right. Hello, Larry Fessenden, Philip Gelatt, and Morgan Galen King. Tell me about who you, in your mind, believe will enjoy your movie, The Spider Knight, and why will they enjoy it?
Oh man. Well, I think I think when put position, it's sort of like an Academy mom movie. It's a serious drama about family and the triumph of the human spirit. Yeah.
That is that is all a lie.
I find that to be a little misleading, for sure.
Okay. It's
try again.
Okay. It's a rotoscoped fantasy epic. It in sort of the sword and sorcery weird fantasy tradition that draws on sort of the rotoscope animation style that people probably know best through Ralph Bakshi's work or parts of the heavy metal movie, which are both classics to me. And yeah, it's pretty violent. It's pretty naked. I think it deals with a lot of existential themes. I think that can appeal to a lot of people. I wouldn't want to pigeonhole them, but
yeah, I would say anybody interested in fantasy film in general, anybody interested in independent animation, anybody who likes their entertainment a little surreal and dark, I think would at least be interested in checking out what we've made. It is it's a particular flavor, but I hope that a lot more people will like it than think they will like it, if that's a funny thing. Like, it's a type of movie that hasn't existed for a while, so I think there's inevitably a little bit of like a when people encounter it, they don't quite know what to make of it. But my hope is that for even people like that, they will come away thinking, oh, that was far more interesting and far more entertaining than I was expecting it to be,
Yeah, I would say if you like Conan the Barbarian and all the sword and sorcery movies that followed, or maybe let's say if you just wanted Lord of the Rings to be more violent, then this is your flick.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, the Milius Conan the Barbarian was a massive influence on. I think on Morgan and me both. I hold that movie up as just a perfectly insane fantasy film.
Yeah, definitely. So I love the dark fantasy vibe you achieved with this movie. And I'm wondering if you could tell my audience how crucial the artist Frank Zappa was to the aesthetic of this movie.
I mean, certainly his collaboration with Ralph Bakshi on Fire and Ice is like the visual paradigm we were trying to tack towards. Frazetta's influence on like sword and sorcery and fantasy in the 70s in particular is incalculable. He defined what it looked like for so many book covers, so many iconic paintings, everything. He just and it's certainly the era that I look back to as like visually my favorite stretch of all the many incarnations of fantasy over the last century.
Okay. And can you guys, all three of you, tell me what your favorite image that Frank Zappa created was?
Oh man. So the one that comes to mind immediately for me is and I hope that it is a Frank Zappa image. It's like, I think it's a Conan cover, and he's like this, and it's from behind, and he's like, and I think there's like a giant snake in front of him, if I remember correctly. I don't know the name of it. I just know it as like a cover. I think he also did a cover for a Carl Edward Wagner collection of one of his Kane books. That's also, it's like that redheaded warrior character that also immediately comes to mind. Yeah.
Oh man, there's one. It's like I forget the name of it, but it's the back of like a monster man who's been cast out of society, and he's in the foreground, and he's like looking out at like this distant like fantasy, sort of an elven fancy city, and just like the deep sadness of being like a monster on the outside of this like shining tower. I've just always felt it tells us so much story just in a glimpse. It's one of my favorites.
I confess that all I can picture is one of his very buxom, scantily clad women lying on a slab of stone, and maybe there's a snake somewhere, and I don't remember there being any deep thematics to that image.
It's a very honest answer, Larry. I
That's
appreciate
true. That's true.
it.
I think he might have explored that theme once or twice. Yeah.
It seems to me, yeah. So that's what came to my mind when we mentioned it.
Well, that's a solid image. Mine's gonna be the one where it's like a guy holding the sword. Mars is behind him, and then a girl's in front of him.
That was incredible. Yep.
That's right.
That's a vibe, you know. It's hard to put it into words. You just feel something.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, all of his artwork. Yeah, it immediately makes you feel something for sure.
And of course, he collaborated with Ralph Bakshi on Fire and Ice, which your movie is definitely a fan of. Let's just say.
Sure.
What do you got a favorite movie by Ralph Bakshi? Mine's Coonskin for sure.
I mean, that one's got a lot of character. I mean, so much of his does, like where a lot of his his like Hey Good Looking and stuff, or like the ones that are outside of the fantasy canon are all so adventurous. I love all the like improvised or like sort of found audio he uses in those is really cool. In a way, Fire and Ice is sort of, I think, the least Bakshi of any of his films, in that it's he's playing it pretty straight with the material, and it's not nearly as eclectic as the others. As far as my favorite, I mean, I think American Pop's probably his masterpiece. If I had to pick one, it's like it's seemingly still underseen, but it's such a it's similar structurally to what you're doing, where it sort of spans generations, and sort of like it almost has a Godfather quality to it, of these just generations of trying to make it as immigrants in America. I think that one's really good. The music's maybe a little overplayed classic rock by this point in history. He picked a bunch of big classics, so it feels a little broad now. But I think it's called
American Pop, though. It had to be broad, right? Like,
so true.
Yeah.
So true.
I mean, I'm gonna say, I don't know if I can pick an absolute favorite. What I will say is my favorite thing about them, and this is just to bring it back to our own movie, because why not, is Wizards is not my favorite movie, but there are so many things about Wizards that I love. Like, I love the way that he took the World War II footage and like repurposed it to like, both as a cost-cutting measure, which he was always finding interesting ways to do, but then also to like, sort of reinforce the thematics of the film. And the other thing that I love about that is it has Ian Miller's backgrounds. Ian Miller is an artist who I absolutely love. Like, he did backgrounds for Wizards. He did backgrounds for Cool World too, which is bizarre. Like, Ian Miller's stuff is so out there that he worked on Cool World is completely crazy to me. But then he also did a poster for us. So I'm gonna say that Wizards is I'm gonna bring it up just because we got to work with Ian Miller, and he's amazing.
The World War II stuff was so terrifying to me as a kid. Like all of a sudden to see these, elves being just traumatized by World War II footage. It was, I mean, I think you can see it in The Spider Knight for sure.
How about you, Larry? What's your favorite Ralph Bakshi movie?
Well, I mean, the thing that's been wonderful about being involved in this movie is I haven't thought about Bakshi for some years. And when this all came up, I thought about just this childhood memory of seeing American Pop. And I'd already been following Bakshi through his fantasy films, but that to me was this huge progression into a more contemporary vernacular. And I just thought, this guy can do anything. This guy really is, along with, Kubrick and Spielberg or something, he's really an auteur of cinema. And I remember feeling like what happened to him over the years, because he just seemed like such a giant of movie making, and he was so seminal in the 70s. So that is my answer. Obviously the fantasy movies are so also iconic, but I remember American Pop. I can tell you the theater I saw it in.
What was the theater?
On 86th Street in Manhattan and Broadway.
Oh wow.
Where I also saw The Howling.
That's funny. Wow, what a vibe. All right, well, Larry, tell me what it was like to be in the cast of this movie, and what recording sessions were typically like for this project.
Well, this all happened during COVID. So, in fact, we were not in a studio. We were in our closets. I don't know. Maybe Richard E. Grant was in a little more elegant place, but I was in my closet in upstate New York. They did send me a microphone, so it was a very generous production. I was impressed that something that was so sort of out there conceptually was still able to afford to send me a microphone. So I was treated very well. And Phil and I just worked through Zoom, and he told me louder, scarier, crazier. And I did what I was told, and I just had a great time. And I knew, I just felt that it was going to be a special project because both the people that I encountered, one of the other producers, what was his name, Phil?
Will.
Yeah, he was such a great guy, very communicative. And yeah, it just went smoothly. Although I think I overmodulated and we actually had to do some stuff over again, which was fun. It's always nice to go back after you put down your lines, and then only afterwards do you figure out what you should have done. So I got a second chance. Keeping the character.
So, Larry, you didn't have any interaction with any other cast. Have you talked to any of the cast members subsequently?
No, and we've done a couple of these interviews, and in a weird way, it's the one thing we haven't focused on because I think there were two types of cast members. There were the folks who actually did the physical work, which you're seeing redrawn in the rotoscope process. So here's to them. And then obviously there were the voice actors. So maybe the fellows can explain that. You know, it was obviously a cast that was somehow involved in the movie over many, many years.
Yeah, I mean, so we, you know, as Larry said, we basically every role was cast twice, right? Like we, you know, because it was rotoscoped, we had to shoot the whole movie live action first. So to do that, none of our, with one exception, that was none of our actual voice cast. The one exception is Betty Gabriel, who is in Get Out and many other things, was in our original live action cast, and we cast her. It was the day after she graduated from Juilliard. She got on a train and came to Rhode Island where we shot, and came and hung out with us in our warehouse and played her part, and then went on to be in Get Out and all kinds of other fantastic things. She's absolutely the best. I absolutely love Betty. But other than her, everybody else in the motion capture cast, well, actually, no, I'm sorry. There are two others. Jordan Smith and Malcolm Mills redid their voices for us too. But anyway, we had a live action cast, and then many years later, when the animation was done, we went and recast a bunch of the voices, and that's when we brought Larry on, and Lucy and Richard and Joe and Patton and the rest of the cast. So yeah, it was really like each of the characters is this strange hybrid between original actor, voice actor, and then the animators. I don't know why I said that with a weird accent. The animators who really brought so much to them as well. You know,
it's your Philippe Gelatt personality.
The animators.
Yeah.
Well, I imagine that Larry and Patton Oswalt and maybe Richard Grant would have been the most enthusiastic cast members about this material. Am I wrong?
You know, you're missing key. Joe Manganiello was very enthusiastic because Joe is really into dark fantasy, and one of my favorite things that anybody has said about it was, so we recorded his dialogue before COVID, so he's the only actor who we got to go and be in a studio with, and when he met us for the first time, was like, oh, I saw the first 5 minutes of this film and thought it was made by crazy people, and I want to work with crazy people. I was like, oh, that's so kind. So kind of you to identify us and want to work with us. So yeah, he was really into it. I mean, they all were. Like, you know, I don't know that Lucy Lawless likes genre material, but it has been her lot in life to do it, and she does it so very well. And she also, I mean, just brought so much enthusiasm to the part, and really engaged with it in a really deep way, really like had thought about Zod's past and what type of accent she should use, and really wanted to make sure she was differentiated from, say, like a Xena performance. Wanted to make her feel not like a warrior and more like a a swamp witch, which is what she was playing.
Yeah, it's really cool. I remember hearing about this movie because I was covering South by Southwest earlier this year, and I was just like hearing dark fantasy vibes and then reading the cast, and it just sounded like everything was going to gel. It was really going to work out.
I think it all came together beautifully myself.
Definitely. I mean, I like it. It's one of those movies where I was saying, "Oh, cool," a lot. That's a good place to be.
That's what we want. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
And then like maybe like a cringe occasionally as like a bone snaps or a jaw shatters, but then go back to saying, "Oh, cool." Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I had my fun watching the movie, but how long did it take to put this thing together?
We started writing it, I think maybe January 2014, and then we're filming the motion reference footage in a warehouse by the spring. So,
Wow.
And then pretty much immediately went straight into animation. We edited the live action footage and then went straight into animation after that and worked on it until about 3 days before South by Southwest.
Oh my God.
2021. So yeah.
Yeah, that was like March, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Very cool. So, are you guys planning to make more movies like this, or even a sequel?
I mean, we certainly talked about it. There's outlines written for things we could do with this world. That's the 7 years of making it was a lot of time for us to sort of think about other directions it could go in, and we tinkered with other outlines and scripts over the years. So I think there's a lot of pretty cool places it could go. I think if we were going to do it again in a rotoscope style, we would need either a much bigger team or a less brute force approach to the animation, because this was all hand drawn and difficult. So, I certainly would like to do more if we have the opportunity.
That's nice. Well, that's good for me. I mean, and anyone who feels like Lord of the Rings could have been a little bit more violence. You like Conan the Barbarian. What are some other ways? Like the Sword and the Sorcerer is fun. You like the Barbarian Queen.
Yeah, I mean, some of the fall off is so hard after Conan that I love a lot of that stuff. I like Ator and whatever.
I saw that last year. Yeah, it's a funny movie.
I love all this. We've been talking a lot about Lucio Fulci's Conquest. I think that one's underrated. I would say it's got its issues, but I love its like dreamy fog world, and it's does not shy away from Fulci ultra violence. So I think that's all pretty fun.
What is better than I expected, and I don't think anybody will ever agree with me, except for this one person I was talking to about it about 4 nights ago, is the Solomon Kane movie that came out in like 2010. It's like pretty good for about 45 minutes, but then it makes this unfortunate decision that it needs to have a plot, and then as soon as it has a plot, it like completely crashes and burns. But for about the first 45 minutes, it's like the Solomon Kane movie that you would want it to be, where he's just sort of skulking around the landscape, being a like puritanical monster hunter, which is all you could want. But then it crashes and burns. So
I'm personally less into the Beastmaster than I wanted to be. You hear Phantasm Director and you think solid dark Frank Frazetta vibe, but not so much.
I loved it as a kid, but I have not revisited it in probably 30 years. So
I bought that fancy Blu-ray when we were at the Telluride Horror Festival, and I haven't watched it yet. It's sitting on my shelf. It's got great cover artwork though.
Yeah, I bought it because it looks awesome, and then it was just kind of whatever.
I love the wing guy that melts people. Those guys are so scary. Or at least in my mind's eye, they were terrifying. Like maybe I won't go home again and try to revisit that.
I was reading some reviews that were on the negative side for this movie, and I found the take a little annoying. That it's just kind of like they kind of throw out that word throwback or like gratuitous or indulgent without really giving any meaning or context to it. I found personally like why those are bad things or means that this movie is like less serious. But I don't know. Do you want to address those criticisms, or just what's the most annoying criticism for this movie?
Well, I do. It,
Go on, Morgan.
oh, look, we'd be here all day if I addressed every criticism that I've harbored in my heart. But I always think, I mean, in a very broad sense, the reviews are almost never actually about the film, but the perspective of the reviewer. I find the attempts at objectivity are almost always pretty flawed, and you can really feel that when it's your own film. But it's the one, like you mentioned, gratuitous. Like the nudity in our film, barring one shot that exists purely to act as contrast with the rest of the sexuality and nudity in the film, is non-sexual. Like it's just people who are naked, but in a naturalistic sense. That is not, it's not designed to titillate. It's not shot with the gaze to titillate. So when people are like, the nudity in the film is gratuitous, I feel like that's saying more about the reviewer's relationship with the nude human body than what we're actually doing with the film, which is not, I don't think, and generally people pick up that it's not exploitative or particularly prurient in that sense. The gore too, I think, works in like there's a lot of it. I grew up on the Evil Dead films. The gore is really fun to draw. All of that is part of it, but I think it also serves to make the violence matter and to make the horror of war and of killing people feel like it has consequences, and they're not just people, knights who fall over when a sword hits their chest plate.
Yeah, I mean, I hate the throwback critique, as I'm sure Larry and Morgan do as well. I mean, just because something is like done in a style that was like an aesthetic that was discarded for really no reason 30 years ago doesn't mean that it can't be A, revitalized, and B, meaningful and beautiful in the 21st century. Like it's not a it shouldn't disqualify it just because it's not the thing you just watched. Like just because the thing looks different than the last 10 years of movies you watched doesn't mean that it's not valid.
Absolutely. All right, well, guys, thank you very much for your time. I really enjoyed your movie, The Spider Knights. My final question is, what do you think is the best drug to take with the movie?
Well, I mean, personally, I think most hallucinogens don't pair well with films. Like, it's just too hard to watch a movie on mushrooms. I've tried. It's very complicated. Like, you spend more time looking at the texture of the screen than processing the psychedelic content. So I would suggest watching it once sober, or maybe with a beer, and then watching it again once you sort of know what's going on marijuana. Because rewatching films stoned is so much better, because you're seeing it feels new for the first time, but it's easier to follow, and you pick up all these details and minor things. That's my Dr. Morgan's prescription for how to watch this film.
I love it. I gotta edit it there. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.